Right. So after we create these pack fragments. So before the RBD configure stop, everything is a polygon. Everything's a regular polygon. We're in regular polyland. And once we do the RBD configure, by default, it will create the pack fragments for us. So now we have 1,568 pack fragments or pieces. And if you just do an exploded view, we can see what those pieces look like. Perfect. We got some pretty interesting shapes here. Cool. So now all I want to do after is setting my velocities to when I will be injecting these velocities. And what I've done, so don't be, this is nothing crazy. It's actually really just simple. All I'm doing is just initializing my velocities and my angular velocity. So if you have a look, I already have an add node here. We check our velocities. Pieces in the center, closer to the impact point, have velocities pointing up, while pieces that are further away from the impact point have their velocities pointing outward, like this. So the way I did that is relatively simple. Oops. So really, remember we have that mask attribute that we created. That's all I'm using to create some nice blend between two vectors. So all I'm using the mask creator. So if we just go here and set our first vector, vel1 equals up, and then vel2 is, I'm just going to normalize the v at p, because that will give us a vector that points, if we have a look, it'll give us a vector that points outwards. Boom. Since our impact point is literally on the origin, so it's simple enough to create this kind of vector using our current position. Cool. So now if you have a look at doing the blend, all I'm going to do is create a blend variable and making a ramp out of that. Fall off vel blend, and we will be using the mask creator. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to replace the normals. Slurp between vel1 and vel2 using the blend node. Now we have to reverse this. Now you can see, I'm just going to multiply this just to visualize it better. Now you can see that some of the pieces are pointing up, while pieces further away from the impact point will have their velocities pointing outward. That's all I've really did for the velocity. As you can see, I have two velocity, vel0 and vel1, and I'm just creating that effect. Can remove some of this, whatever. Cool. So the next one is for the angular velocity. If you have a look at my angular velocity, which I just temporarily set into the normals, v at n equals v at w, I've got these kinds of velocities that go kind of like a spiral thing. So what it's doing is that the angular velocity is just saying spin me around this axis, So the way I got this axis is pretty simple. It's just using a cross product between an up vector and the vector that points outwards from the origin. So if you have a look again, I'm just gonna delete the pieces so we can visualize our vectors better. All right. Remember, we have the first vector, I would say, there one would be our RP. So if you visualize that, we got velocities that point outwards using the RP. And then next, our up vector, which is just gonna be a vector on the y-axis. So we have a look at the y-axis vector. Awesome. So if we take the cross product between these two vectors of dir1, I don't even need to say dir1, it's dir and up. Now all you'll see are vectors that go around. So a cross vector is literally just a vector that is perpendicular to the plane that that gets created from two vectors. So if you have a look at our dir, it's going to be that. So we've got these velocities pointing this way, and then another velocity that points up. So that will give us kind of like a plane. So if I have a look at this again, it's going to say n up times 10. Oops. Put v. And awesome. So now you can kind of see that they would make a plane with these two vectors, and that plane would basically be the output of the cross product between these two vectors would be a vector that is perpendicular to this plane. So now if you have a look at what the result of that vector is, it will literally be this. Oops. So if you have a look again, so that's the plane. That's a plane. Then the cross product between that is that. Perfect. So that's pretty much what the cross product is, and all I'm doing here is just saying, so you see this is the dir vector and the up vector, cross product of those two is x, and with the angular velocity I'm just normalizing the x and multiplying it by that mask crater that we have. Perfect. And now if we just visualize all these vectors, they all are pretty even looking. So I'm just using an attribute adjust vector node to noise up the direction a little bit, so we've got more interesting shapes when these vectors get injected into the velocities of our rigids. So I'm just setting it to adjust the direction only with some noise, and then I'm using another attribute adjust vector, but just adjusting the length. So some pieces will have more speed, while some will have less speed. Perfect. And more adjustments to our vectors. That and then this, just increasing the velocities where the impact point happens. And cool. So this is pretty much what I've done for velocities, for initializing the velocities on our rigids. And all right.